Hello, this is Pastor Bella, Alex Nosage, Lagos, Nigeria. Good evening, God girls, and welcome to another teaching on Joseph, a purpose-driven man. And the general topic for this series of teachings on Joseph is On the Road to Goshen. And we're going into chapter 45 today. And it's so excited because we've looked at Undercover Joseph, where he had to test his brothers and, he kept on testing them and testing them. And then now it's time for the big reveal. All right, so just a quick recap. We started looking at the life of Joseph from chapter 37 of Genesis, and we had this naive 17-year-old boy gifted as a dreamer, and he was even called a dreamer, but he was just naive, innocent, a pure heart, and he was born in the midst of chaos and evil, where his mother was the loved wife, and his father Jacob had two wives, and his mother Rachel was the loved wife, while the other wife, Leah, had the majority of the other sons of Jacob. And there was division in that household. When you go back and think of that foundation, children are very sensitive. Children can tell whether you love them or, whether you prefer one over the other. So his brothers always kind of knew that, okay, Joseph is the favored one, Joseph and Benjamin, and Rachel is the loved wife. And, so I'm just going to hate him. I'm just going to hate him because he has all our father's love. And all that climaxed at the age of 17 when Joseph shared a couple of dreams with his family about the exaltation God was going to give him years later that I'm not even sure he fully comprehended, but he shared it with his family, and it stirred up so much hatred in his brothers' hearts that they actually planned to kill him. Oh, yes, they did. They said they had had enough of this dreamer, and you know what? Let's just be done with him. That is deep, sweltering hatred. Can you imagine such hatred? To plot to kill your brother just because he was Jacob's favorite son and came from a loved wife and, had the father's love. It's really, really sad that they were ready to do such a thing. But God was with Joseph because God had birthed him for a great purpose. And Joseph is going to tell us why. He's going to tell us his purpose in this chapter that we're looking at today, chapter 45. And that's what the maturity of walking with God does to you. When you go through so much with God, you start to analyze, why am I going through all this? And then you will then begin to understand that you're going through all this because you were created for a specific purpose. This is a purpose-driven life. Your life does not belong to you. It belongs to God, and God has put you on this path because there's something God wants to accomplish. And we see that in the life of purpose-driven man Joseph. So God diverted his brothers from actually killing him by raising up Judah. Actually, there were two brothers who were against this. One was all the way against the murder. That was Reuben, the first son of Jacob. And then there was Judah, who wasn't all the way against getting rid of Joseph. He just didn't want Joseph to be killed. So he said, brothers, let's just sell him. Let's sell him into slavery. And Joseph was sold into slavery at the age of 17. And so he ends up in Egypt, in Potiphar's household, elevated, favored, the number one slave man in that house, where Potiphar handed up everything to him. And he succeeded because God was with him. Even though he was a slave, he was really favored for the master of the house to hand off everything to him. But there was a problem. The master of the house, Potiphar, had a wife, a very spoiled wife. A spoiled, rich, bored woman who I call Mrs. P because the Bible never tells us her name. She's just known as Potiphar's wife. And this woman harassed Joseph. Handsome Joseph. Joseph, the Bible had to tell us that Joseph was handsome. He was handsome, he was efficient, he was a leader, and this woman kept on coming at him. She wanted to sleep with him. And that's one thing you need to understand, that when your destiny is great, the devil is going to come for you in so many ways. And in this instant, he used Potiphar's wife as a temptation for Joseph. You have to be aware when you're on your path to greatness or your path to purpose, temptation is coming. And it may not be sexual sin, which was Joseph's temptation. It may be something else entirely different. Just be aware that the devil is coming for you. And as I've told you before, the devil doesn't come in his ugly self. He uses people. Just as the Holy Spirit is within you as a child of God, those who are not surrendered to Christ do not have the Holy Spirit operating in them. They have the devil operating in them. So the devil was operating through Mrs. P just so Joseph could succumb to sexual sin. That was a huge test from God. Do you know that? Do you know that that was a huge test from God? And you have to be very careful with God, because you're going to go through good times and bad times, but there are tests along the way. And God was watching from heaven as this woman kept on coming after Joseph, coming after Joseph and coming after Joseph. And Joseph refused to yield. He said, no, I'm not going to sleep with you. And she ended up accusing him of rape, told her husband that, hey, Joseph raped me, and Joseph ended up in jail. But you know what? Joseph may not have succumbed to temptation and yielded to the pressure of his boss's wife. You know, pressure was our initial first message of the year. Pressure 1 and pressure 2. Some of you are under so much pressure that you end up doing things you're not supposed to do. Joseph was under pressure to preserve his occupation, his good status in Potiphar's house. He was under pressure. If he wanted things to keep on being good for him, he just needed to sleep with Mrs. P. And many of us have been through instances like that. There are people in careers where that's why sexual harassment is a policy in major corporations of the world. You know, some people can't get promoted. Some women can't get promoted unless they sleep with your bosses. That's sexual harassment. And because you're under pressure and out of fear, you want to preserve your job, you end up sinning against God. But Joseph refused to sin against God. No matter how things were now good in Potiphar's house, he would not sin against God. And that is why I always talk about having the fear of God and the love for God. If you love God and you fear him, there are just some things you will not do. And Joseph was not ready to go into sexual sin just because he wanted to preserve his job. And Joseph, of course, ended up in prison because he stood up for God. And when you stand up for God, just know you're going to land in hot water. Yes. When you stand up for God, people are going to mock you. You're going to get into trouble. You're going to lose some certain things. In this case, Joseph lost his freedom. But guess what? When Joseph said no, he secured his destiny. When Joseph said no, he secured his inheritance. When Joseph said no, he secured his bloodline, because as you will see further down in the chapter, his sons Ephraim and Manasseh were mightily blessed by God. And why has Joseph been singled out amongst all his brothers for greatness? Why is his story that which has stood the test of time? God rewards those who are uncompromisingly faithful to him. So Joseph ends up in jail, and again, he's covered with the favor of God, because the head jailer just gravitates towards Joseph and puts Joseph in charge. So God is showing him that, Joseph, you're a leader. And everything that I've taken you through, it's showing that you are a leader in Potiphar's house. You were quickly elevated as the head slave in charge. Here in jail again. You know, you're definitely showing that you're a leader. And that's what you need to understand as God girls. As you're going through things, God is revealing who you are to you. So take note and be sensitive of the seasons of life you're going through. As you're growing and maturing in the things of God, you will get to learn more about yourself. And I can assure you, at the age of 17, Joseph, first of all, as we later found out he was just a dreamer. He wasn't an interpreter. Joseph became an interpreter in jail. At the age of 17, being the favorite son of Jacob, I'm sure he didn't have the ability or the chance to lead, having so many older brothers who would put Joseph in charge of anything. So he needed to be alone with God, and so that his inner strength and attributes would come out. So many times there's some things that you go through and you're just so disheartened over it. But when you really ask yourself, if you hadn't gone through all this pain and disappointment, would you have discovered the inner strength that you have or the inner giftings that you have? So, on this purpose-driven path on the road to Goshen, Joseph is discovering a lot more about himself, right? So, he gets to jail, he becomes an interpreter, and fast forward to when he's eventually out of jail and exalted by the Pharaoh, making him a ruler in Egypt and basically in charge of Egypt. And you see the common ground from Potiphar totally handing over the reins to Joseph. The jailer in prison totally hands over the reins to Joseph. And again, once he gets to the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh elevates him by the grace of God, the Pharaoh handles everything over to Joseph. So Joseph is really an efficient project manager. All right? It's just amazing to have a Joseph around. They just handle everything. You really don't need to do much. You just have to oversee, right? So Joseph was really, truly, exceedingly gifted, but he stayed faithful to God no matter what he was taking through. He stayed faithful to God, and that's what God wants you and I to learn, because Joseph went through so much. It took 13 years. 13 years from the age of 17 until he was exalted as a ruler in Egypt at the age of 30. But yet, the sacrifice was Joseph had to be separated from his family all these years. And you see the series of tests when his brothers now come into his presence seeking food, and Joseph has to be patient, and he goes undercover just trying to ascertain if his father Jacob is all right and Benjamin, his brother, is all right. This is a span of a long, long time, basically a long time. All right? So now we're going into chapter 45, but I want to draw your attention to something. At the age of 30, when Joseph was exalted, he had interpreted those dreams that there would be 7 years of abundance before 7 years of famine. So, age 30, 7 years of abundance. That would make him age 37. 2 years into the famine. I mean, after 7 years of abundance, we're going into 7 years of famine. 2 years into it, he gets to meet his brothers, and the whole undercover and everything wraps up at the age of 39. So from the age of 17 to the age of 39, how many years has Joseph been separated from his father Jacob, his brother Benjamin, those who he truly cared about, and basically his whole family? It has been 22 years. 22 years. That is a long time. When you're on a purpose-driven path, you're going to go through so much. We're on the road to Goshen, right? But there's been joy and there's been pain, there's been disappointment, there's been fear, there's been anxiety. But the biggest lesson to us all is to hold on to God. Joseph never let go of God. In all seasons of life, he never ever let go. And God is watching you to see if you pass the tests. There will be tests coming. There will be evil coming your way. There will be temptation. God wants you to stand and hold on to him, and he will exalt you. He will exalt you, and he will see you through. All right? So let's go into chapter 45. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him, while Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. So remember, it was the plea when we looked at chapter 44 previously, that it was the plea from Judah that really got Joseph into an emotional state. The Bible had revealed that while he was testing his brothers, sometimes it would take a moment away to go and weep. So you could see that he wasn't doing this because he was evil, but he really needed to know the character of his brothers. If they were still those bad men who were willing and ready to kill him, or if they had changed. So he had to be careful with them. And after Judah had summarized everything they'd been through and really was pleading for the case of Benjamin, so Benjamin could be returned to Jacob, Joseph could not hold himself any longer. He couldn't keep up this undercover thing anymore. He had seen enough, he had learned enough that his brothers had genuinely repented. They were no longer those evil men of yesterday, and so there was no need for him to be undercover anymore. Now he could securely reveal himself, because now he had discovered what he needed to discover, that they had changed and they were not the same people anymore. Benjamin is alive, and now he really truly wants to reconcile with his father Jacob, because he's been away from his father for 22 years. And you have to also look at the kindness of God, that Jacob's life was preserved, because it would have been a really painful, traumatic experience for Joseph to go through all this and lose his father in the middle of it all. And of course, if that happened, God would have still seen him through, like God sees us through every tragedy that befalls us. But it's just the mercy of God that kept Jacob alive, so that Jacob, who previously thought Joseph was dead, would now get to see that God had kept him and preserved him, and they could meet and be together for a little more time before Jacob eventually passes away. So God is merciful in all the things that you're going through. I've told you several times, focus on the good things. Yeah, bad things are happening. Yes, there are disappointments constantly around you, but don't focus on your problems. Focus on God, because God is up to something good. Okay, so Joseph has revealed himself to his brothers, and his brothers are scared, like, whoa. I'm sure all the memories are now rushing back that, oh my goodness, we planned to kill this guy. He heard us planning to kill him. We sold him into slavery, and oh, whoa, what's he gonna do to us right now? What's he gonna do? Now, we get it, why he's been so difficult from when we came to get food from him. And, so all these memories are just wrapped up in their brains, and they don't even know what to do. So Joseph has to go further and assure them. Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. So let's just make things clear. Yeah, I am Joseph, your brother, and you all sold me into Egypt. Let's just make things clear right now. There's no more pretending, no more pretense. I know what's up. You all sold me into slavery. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God has sent me before you to preserve life. Everything Joseph had been through. And when you're going through stuff with God, sometimes you'll just be like, Lord, why me? Lord, why? What did I do, Lord? Why did I have to go through this? Lord, why? God may not tell you why, but God will show you why. So Joseph had all these years to analyze why his life may have looked like it took a wrong turn. He grew up in a household of wealth and a father who loved him. He grew up in a safe place, but he was wrenched. He was wrenched out of that family and went through, to be a slave, to lose your freedom. Slavery is not even, that in itself is a whole different topic. Joseph went through a lot. Imagine having your freedom taken away from you. To be a slave, you may end up with an owner who really doesn't care about you and would mistreat you and abuse you. Slaves did not have any rights whatsoever. So Joseph really came from place where he would have wondered, Lord, why is my life take this direction? Lord, I love you, but why am I a slave right now? Or Lord, I love you, why am I in jail right now? I am sure he had those moments with God. But look at what he tells them. This is the maturity that you will get after being in the school with God, because that's the school of God. God is going to take you through some stuff. I call it his school. And the wisdom of God that you will get from experiences like that. He says, do not be angry. Do not be angry with yourselves that you sold me, because God had a plan. God ensured that that happened because God knows the future. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending. He knows the future. He knew that something was coming that will wipe out a large population of the earth. Do you think people did not die during this famine? Was everybody able to come to Egypt for food? That's a long time. 7 years, no food. So God knew that was coming, and he created Joseph to be a deliverer for that time. And that's what he's explaining to his brothers. And he's telling them in verse 6, for these 2 years the famine has been in the land, but there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. So he knows. See, it's wonderful when you have such a spiritual gift of dreams, interpretation, visions, and things like that, basically the prophetic, because God is showing you what is to come. So you can adequately prepare yourself and prepare the church of God, because to go into the prophetic is really not for you, it's to edify the church of God so that the church can be prepared, right? So Joseph knows what's up, that the whole world did not know that the famine was going to be 7 years, but Joseph and the Pharaoh knew this, and they had made adequate preparation for it. And so now he's informing his brothers, because his brothers, I'm sure, didn't even know either. But now they know that there's 5 more years of famine. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Another version says, God has sent me here to keep you and your families alive so that you will become a great nation. Now remember, Jacob's name was Jacob, right? And his name was changed to Israel. And we have the nation of Israel today, right? Israel was going to be a nation, and the nation started from Jacob, who was changed to Israel, and his sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, all these sons of Jacob. That's why they became the 12 tribes of Israel, right? The nation was coming through Jacob and his sons. That's why when you go back in the Bible, you see the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where the nation of Israel came out of. All right? So God had prepared Joseph to keep this nation of Israel alive. They were not really a nation yet, but they were going to be a nation. All right? And if they had perished in the famine, there would have been no nation of Israel. So God raised Joseph up to be a deliverer, to create a place for them. And we're about to find out what that place is, right? God is awesome. God is up to something good. You may not understand the way he's moving. You may not understand how he's doing what he's doing, but you just stay faithful. He's writing out the story of your life, and it's a beautiful story. Yes, there are disappointments along the way. Yes, there's pain along the way, but there's also greatness, exaltation, good news is coming your way as long as you are a faithful child of God. In verse 8, he says, so now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Isn't that amazing? A father to Pharaoh? Basically, yeah, Pharaoh had handed over this project to Joseph. When the people were asking for food, he said, go to Joseph. Go to Joseph. Joseph has the answer for you. So Joseph was, even though the Pharaoh was the overall ruler of Egypt, Joseph had the reins. He was the one running the show. And we see a little of that while he was in jail. He was the one running the show, right? In Potiphar's house, he was the one running the show. And while he was in his father's household, he was the one running the show with Jacob's love. So Joseph was a charismatic person. He was covered in the favor of God. There are just some people who just shine. No matter where you place them, no matter what you do to them, they will shine. They will succeed. And they will do so with a beautiful character, humility, love, strength, leadership. You see all that positivity in Joseph. He just shined. There's nothing you would do to Joseph that he wouldn't shine. Right there in the jail, God revealed him. In Potiphar's house, God revealed him. His excellent leadership skills were being revealed. And a leader is always needed. When there's trouble that's about to happen, who do you look for? You look for a leader. You're not looking for people who don't know what they're doing. You're looking for a leader. You're looking for a Joseph. He was purpose-driven. And a purpose-driven person is not only living in purpose, but is still moving forward despite the challenges of that purpose. You're driven. You're a driven individual. Despite your obstacles, you're still going to get up and move. Remember when he told the butler that, hey, I've been accused wrongly, so please, when you go to the Pharaoh, tell him that I'm Joseph and I'm innocent and I'm in jail, and please get me out of here. And Joseph was hoping that the butler would remember and be out, so he could be out of jail during short notice, but it took 2 more years. 2 more years before Joseph was eventually out of jail. This man went through a lot, but did that affect his relationship with God? No. And many times when we are going through hard times, we turn away from God. That's a big mistake. That's a big mistake, to let your problems so overwhelm you that you stop having a relationship with God. Only God knows when that problem will be over. Only God can get you out of that problem. So why are you turning away from God? Why are you turning away from God? Whew. All right. So I just love the maturity that's coming out of him. And he knows, you see, when you're in that place of deep suffering, and on your path to purpose, because you will go through some suffering. There's no way out of it. You can't, as I said, Joseph being the beloved son of Jacob in his home, a home where he was shown love. What do you want to preach to us, Joseph? What do you want to do to us or do for us? Since your experience with life has just been love, love, love. What can you do for us, Joseph? So Joseph had to go through some stuff. He had to see some harsh realities, had to experience some harsh episodes of life so that the wisdom of God could be increased upon his life. So now he had the wisdom to say, I've analyzed my life, brothers. Don't blame yourselves that you sold me into slavery. It was all part of God's plan for my life, because the nation of Israel needs to be preserved. And I was raised as the deliverer. He understood his purpose. So it will get to a point in your life that you will understand your purpose. You will be able to connect why certain things have happened to you and why you need to keep on pressing on in faith. Not for you to sit down complaining, being angry at God, or I don't know, just being negative about it. Take all your experiences, the good, the bad, everything. Take them all and learn what God is teaching you. He has to teach you so you can teach others. He has to deliver you so you can deliver others. Joseph had to be delivered first, delivered of being an innocent boy with stars in his eyes. He needed to go through the school of God to understand the mandate of God upon his life. God was raising him up for a big job, and he had to be prepared for that job. And in order to be prepared for that job, he had to go through stuff. But even as he was going through the negative things, you still see the positive things that were happening with him, the favor of God, as he was raised as a leader along the way. You know, it's amazing because the work he did in Potiphar's house and the work he did while he was in jail were able to help him be an effective ruler in Egypt. So every step of the way, your experience is preparing you for where God is taking you to. So learn, take notes, be teachable, because what you're going through today is going to help you tomorrow. All right? So, he says in verse 9, hurry and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children, your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. I mean, it's amazing. Goshen is a place of prosperity and wealth and rest, created to preserve the nation of Israel, to preserve the children of God. We are on the road to Goshen. Goshen was where God settled Jacob and his sons, where they increased and eventually became slaves. Yes, eventually became slaves in the land of Egypt. Remember Moses? Remember Moses, let my people go? Yeah, the next book after Genesis is Exodus. And the life of Joseph wraps up the book of Genesis. But it's showing us what's coming next, right? So, God had prophesied. No, God doesn't prophesy. God had, excuse me. God had told Abraham. Let's go there right quick. Genesis chapter 15. 13 to 14. God had told Abraham something about what is about to happen. It was a prophecy for Abraham to look out and know that something is going to happen with his descendants. And in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 to 14, then Jehovah told Abraham, your descendants will be oppressed as slaves in a foreign land for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and at the end they will come away with great wealth. So this was midway through that prophecy. Jacob and his family was midway through that prophecy of God upon Abraham. All right? This was the beginning of the nation of Israel, or the people of Israel, growing to a great number in the land of Egypt. It all started at Goshen. Okay? So, just in case you're wondering what this whole Goshen thing is all about, a place had to be prepared by God during this famine that I'm sure took out a lot of lives. He ensured that the household of Jacob and his sons were preserved, because the nation of Israel was going to come out of this household. And God had raised one of Jacob's sons, Joseph, to be the deliverer, to implement and prepare and carry this out in Goshen, which was a land in Egypt where Joseph was really going to pamper his family and take care of them as he is telling them. So verse 13, so you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. See, he just wants to see his dad. It's been 22 years. Wouldn't you want to see your dad after 22 years? Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. You can see that the forgiveness is total. It's complete. You do not embrace and kiss someone you're upset with. But the Bible tells us that he did not only kiss Benjamin, who's his blood brother, but also his half brothers. He kissed all of them and wept with them, because this had really been a long, hard, tedious journey with God. And then on your purpose driven journey, you really can't hold on to unforgiveness. You cannot hold on to unforgiveness. Everything that has been done to you and all that has happened to you are all part of the purpose driven life that you have. So you can't hold on to unforgiveness. If Joseph had refused to forgive his brothers, he would not have come this far with God. You cannot go far with God if your heart is just filled with vengeance and you're just moody and you're just depressed and you're just angry. No, God comes in and purifies your heart, and that's what he did for Joseph. So this is a beautiful point of reconciliation. It's been 22 years in the making, and despite everything that has happened, going forward, Joseph, being raised as a deliverer, cannot hold any hard feelings to what his brothers did to him, because he sees it was all part of his purpose-driven life. In your purpose-driven life, there's joy and there is pain and there is betrayal. There's nothing that is more painful than those who you believe love you turn around and mistreat you. Betrayal is really, 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 really very painful. But don't let it distract you. Let it strengthen you to press on into your purpose. God is taking you somewhere. He was taking Joseph somewhere. It took 13 years, right, to become a ruler in Egypt. And how many more years later till he was fully reconciled with his family? It's not easy, but God will see you through. Verse 16, now the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan. Bring your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. And that's Goshen, by the way. Goshen is the best of the land of Egypt. And you will eat the fat of the land. Again, Goshen, that's the place to be, right? Now you are commanded, do this, take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives, bring your father and come. Also do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Then the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh. And he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. Of course, he's an elder brother. You understand that, right? Benjamin was the only brother that Joseph was older than. So if you have a baby sibling in your home, no matter how much they grow, you always want to spoil them and, give them something, right? So Joseph was just being a loving, cool older brother who was now in a place of privilege, and he's giving Benjamin some extra good stuff. So good looking out, big brother Joseph. And he sent to his father these things, 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey, okay? Now he's feeding the dad for his journey coming back, because Joseph doesn't want to waste any more time. Brothers, you're basically going to go back right now and tell my father that I'm alive, and you all need to pack up all your stuff out of Canaan and head on back here. So the food he was given was the food that they would enjoy on the journey back. Isn't that so awesome? All right. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed, and he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. Another version says, see that you do not quarrel along the way. Joseph knows his brothers very well, that they're just a divisive bunch, and he's telling them, y'all don't fight over this, because maybe you all need to go tell your dad what you did all these years ago, because Jacob thought I was dead, but now you're going to have to tell him what you did. So don't fight about it. Just do what you have to do. Then they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still because he did not believe them. I mean, are you going to believe that after 22 years that a child that you thought was dead and gone is actually alive? And not only that, he's the ruler in Egypt. Okay, that's too much for old man Jacob to take. It's just too much. But when they told him of the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Then Israel said, "It is enough. Joseph my son is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." This is the end of chapter 45. I do hope you're enjoying this journey, this road to Goshen. At least you've seen a little of Goshen today. So we will continue this story until we are done with it. So keep your hearts open, stay teachable, stay happy, love God, fear God, despite what you're going through. God is taking you somewhere. So trust God, God girls. He loves you and I love you. This is Pastor Bella, Alex Nosagye, Lagos, Nigeria, Ultimate God Girl. God bless you.